Well, this morning I want to, again, we're speaking about family relationships, and, we announced, if you didn't catch it, we're having a second child. We're very excited, and we're hopeful that everything goes well, and we welcome a second young boy into our lives, and we're so grateful for that. But Sarah and I were married for 8 years before we had Timothy, and so we got really used to life as a married couple and just our family being just the two of us, right? And it sometimes still, even to this day, it sometimes still doesn't seem real that we have a son and that we're going to be having another one. And so I sometimes catch myself and say, oh yeah, we have kids now. And it's so strange because that wasn't the case for so long. But here's the thing, I do think about what I'm calling here the involuntary nature of family. What I mean by that is that kids don't choose to be born. Kids don't choose who to be born to either. They don't choose their parents. They don't choose their family situations. And so there's an involuntary nature to that, in the sense that they didn't choose this life. In a sense, we've chosen to bring them into this world, right? And into our family. So imagine this. Imagine for some weird reason that you were kidnapped and brought into a person's home, a couple people who lived there, and you were stuck there and you had to live with these two people. And not only did these two people, force you to live there, but then they treat you badly. And they expect you to treat them well, to treat you with respect and even obedience, but they can treat you however you want. Wouldn't there be an incredible sense of injustice in that situation, right? Like, that's totally not fair. You're forcing these people to be here, and you're treating them badly, and you expect them to treat you well. That doesn't make a lot of sense. If you have to be in a situation where you don't have a choice, the best thing that people can do who are, in charge of that situation is make your life really great, right? Because at least you would say, well, I didn't choose to be here, but this is pretty good. And you know what? If I'd had a choice, I probably would want to be here. So here's the thing. Obviously, it's a loosely veiled metaphor for children. I already alluded to it, right? And so children, I think every single child, we are all children of somebody, right? I think we all, consciously or not, either consciously or unconsciously, we all kind of understand that there is an unfair nature to life, right? That we didn't choose to be born, we didn't choose the people that we were born to. In fact, you often hear teenagers say, I didn't choose for you to have me, right? And usually that's in a response to some rules being applied to them, right? And it's like, hey, that's not fair. Are you giving me these rules when I didn't choose to be in this situation? Well, there's a bit of a truth to that. And again, if we have this attitude of, you, parents, are the one who brought me into this world, so why wouldn't you treat me well, right? And then that has me thinking about dysfunctional families. And like I alluded to earlier, I want us to have some fun with this series, right? So I'm gonna reference and show clips from TV sitcoms, TV comedy shows that has to do with families. And I'm not an expert in comedy, but I think this is true, that the reason why we laugh at stuff is because we find some truth in it, right? Something resonates with us. And whether you feel good or bad about that is not the question, but it resonates and you sort of have that reaction of laughter. So I am just thinking about some of my favorite comedy shows, and maybe in the coming weeks I'll choose shows that are perhaps a bit older and therefore maybe more of us know about it. But who here watches or has heard of The Simpsons, obviously, right? Homer Simpson, the father, is usually depicted as a father who is a bit of a buffoon. However, he has a bit of a good heart in him. He would do anything for his children. They sometimes touch on that in the show, but that doesn't really jive with the running gag that Homer often will be chasing Bart and saying, "Why you little?" and then will choke him, right? I mean, it's funny. At the same time, it's terrible. right? So that doesn't really make a lot of sense, or it doesn't really go together. How can you be a loving father and somebody who runs after your children like that and abuses? Or what about his relationship with Lisa, the younger child there after Bart? She is very much her own individual, and Homer doesn't pay attention to her at all and doesn't really know her. And so this is a clip from one of my favorite episodes of Homer getting Lisa a birthday present and completely demonstrating that he has no idea about anything about her. Yeah, that doesn't really work. So I wouldn't say that the Simpson family are a functional family. They would probably be what's called a dysfunctional family. Who here has ever watched That 70s Show? It's another favorite of ours. And if you've watched the show, the relationship between the father, Red, and his son, Eric, right above him, and his daughter, Lori, in the middle there, he always favors Lori and lets her get away with everything, whereas Eric, who is actually a good kid, he is really hard on him and will constantly put him down. And Lori is somebody who's completely irresponsible. And so it's not a functional family. There's not genuine love happening here. In fact, this is just a very quick example of the way Red will talk to Eric. So he'll constantly be insulting Eric. And again, it's funny because it's a comedy and because we kind of see some of our own family life in there. But it's not healthy. It's not functional, right? And lastly, a show called Arrested Development. Anyone watch this show? It's hilarious. And here's the thing. This is perhaps the best modern example of a dysfunctional family because the mother is Lucille, and she's a terrible person. And just her relationship with the kids alone kind of demonstrates this. The main character is Michael there in the middle, and even though he's the responsible one and he's the one who's saving the company and saving the family, she constantly puts him down. And the daughter, Lindsay, she constantly cuts her down and like she has low self-esteem as a result. And then there's Job, who is a bit of a buffoon himself, and she doesn't mind saying so. And lastly, Buster there at the bottom, he's the baby of the family, and so she certainly babies him. But it's quite dysfunctional. And so look at the way Lucille will, funnily enough, say that she loves all of her children equally. Look at this. So, I love all my children equally. Earlier that day, I don't care for Job. Yeah. So all of these are examples of dysfunctional families. And again, they're comedy TV shows, and they're funny because they're escapism. We can watch TV and forget about our lives for a few hours and just get into the comedy of it, right? We don't have to worry about the fact that it's dysfunctional because it's not us, at least, right? But sometimes I do see dysfunction in our family, whether it's my family of origin or my family that we've created as a result of our marriage and our children. So sometimes I see in myself dysfunction and how we treat each other, and I don't like that. And then especially when we see it in other people as well, we will often cringe or have our heart broken when we see other families or other parents treating their children in a poor way, or husband and wife treating each other poorly. It's sad. It's not right. It's not the way it should be. So that is, in fact, the first thing that I want us to sort of do. And if we can train ourselves in this, and over the next few weeks of this series, we can understand it better, we should be able to recognize dysfunction. We should, in ourselves, in our own family, and then in other people, if we have the opportunity to help others. One of my goals is for us to be able to know what exactly is healthy in terms of a family life and what is not healthy. And today really is just an introduction. We're not going to go too deeply into things today. But I want to equip us. I think that is one of the jobs of a pastor, is to equip the congregation, equip the people of God to be able to live a godly, righteous life, right? And one of the things I feel like I need to do for myself and for all of us is to understand what is a healthy relationship, and especially in the context of a family. So let me sort of give you some definitions here. Firstly, dysfunction. What would be a dysfunctional family? I think that a dysfunctional family is a family or an environment in which the people of that family are not able to grow in a healthy way. So maybe it makes more sense if I talk about a healthy family. So a healthy family is an environment in which all the members of that family have an opportunity and they're free to grow. Physically, obviously, but more so emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, in various ways, pursue their interests and pursue their lives. And you're free to do that, and you're supported, and you're loved, and you're encouraged. That's a healthy family situation, right? We don't put each other down. We don't hold each other back or shame each other. We encourage one another and help each other. That's a healthy family. A dysfunctional family, then, would be one in which those things aren't true. And in fact, there's one word that kind of sums it up: fear. Think about fear in the context of family. Anyone here ever been, you don't have to put up your hand, anyone here ever been afraid to be yourself in front of your family? Right? Just to give totally of yourself, to not worry about who you are in front of them. Right? I often think that is one of the things that makes up a dysfunctional family, is that we're often afraid to be honest with the members of our family or just to be ourselves with them. Right? So again, fear. You're afraid to do that. Secondly, I think a dysfunctional family is one in which the members are afraid of making mistakes, because mistakes are often met with punishment or shame. Right? I make mistakes. Do you guys make mistakes? Yeah? Who here enjoys having your mistakes pointed out and, having to be punished for your mistakes or be shamed for your mistakes? I don't think anyone enjoys that, right? And I'm not talking about perhaps little kids like Timothy who need some sort of guidance to know what is right and wrong, and guidance to know what is safe and healthy and what isn't. But as he grows older and as kids grow older, mistakes happen. And we want to learn from our mistakes. We want to grow from our mistakes. We don't want to feel shame and just be stuck in that rut. Or worse, be punished in some horrific way. So, in fact, these two things here, which again I think fear sort of encompasses it all, it's just the tip of the iceberg of what a dysfunctional family is. And maybe we'll go deeper into it in the coming weeks. But if we can recognize the dysfunction in a family, right? And again, if any of this sits uncomfortably with you, I would just ask you to open yourself up to God, right? Because in fact, I actually think that is sort of what we need to do as people, especially as perhaps parents or a spouse in a family relationship. And in fact, if those terms don't apply to you, if you're neither a parent or a spouse, then maybe apply it to your friends and to us as a church family, right? But there's this verse here in the Psalm 127, verse 3, which says, "Children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him." So I think what this is saying is, look at children and look at family relationships as something that we should be grateful for. And if we're not grateful for our kids or for our family relationships, that's a heart issue, right? That's something going on inside of us that needs to be dealt with, right? That when I think of Timothy and our now coming son, I think to myself, and don't get me wrong, we are sometimes frustrated with Timothy, right? We sometimes lose patience or don't have enough patience with him. We're real human beings. We're not like superhumans or anything like that. But when we look at Timothy and when we think about our coming son, we think we have nothing but positive emotion and feelings towards them. That we recognize that we brought them into this world. They're a gift from God. We brought them into this world, and that we are going to give them the opportunity to learn and to grow into good and godly people. And so here's the main contrast. I think I've been saying it this whole time, is that we have a choice to make in our family relationships between healthy, functional family relationships and unhealthy, dysfunctional family relationships. And the key to it all is recognition that God is love, and that he is the one who can help us be all that we can be for our families. In fact, this is a wonderful verse that I found for this series. I think it's the one I put on the bulletin, right? Love comes from God. So therefore, anyone who loves is a child of God and knows God. You know, if you want to know if you really know God, or if you want to be able to say, like, who here has ever heard, and I'm sure we've all heard this, that you hear of some bad experience, something that somebody did that was not very good, and then you find out they're a Christian, right? That ever happened? You know, I've often heard some people say that, you know, sometimes people who call themselves Christians sometimes turn out to be the worst in terms of how they treat other people. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard that, right? Well, the way you can know if you are truly a child of God, somebody who truly knows God, is if you love other people. Because love comes from God. And anyone who loves is a true, genuine child of God and knows God. So think about this. You could possibly be in your family relationships thinking that everything's fine, right? I'll be the first one to admit, I will often think everything's fine in our family, in our house. And then suddenly Sarah will come to me or something will happen and be like, ooh, that's not great. We have to fix that. We have to do something about that, right? So that's the key here, is that Jesus actually said to his religious opponents, he said, I know you don't have God's love within you. But the thing about that is they thought that they were good. They thought that they were doing okay, right? Jesus' religious opponents, the religious leaders of the day, they thought they were doing well. And Jesus says to them, I know you don't have God's love within you. So, what do we do when we are possibly confronted, as, again, I often am, and then we, I think, can all look to our family relationships and say, is it everything that it could be? And we say, no, it's not everything that it could be, and it could improve. So what do? What's our response? Is it to be like the Pharisees and say, oh, whatever, we don't believe you, we don't know what you're talking about? Or is it to be humble and to be open and honest and pursue God and ask him, Lord, I thought everything was okay, but maybe it's not. Maybe there's something that I need to do, or something that I need to change in me, or to pray for something in our family to see that positive change. So, all of us have some work to do in our family relationships, right? And all of us can take a moment and pray to God and open ourselves up to him and say, well, maybe there's something that I need to change that will bring positive growth or improvement to my family. And to close this morning, we have the ideal perfect family as an example. And who's that? Well, I actually started in my sermon this week, I actually wrote a bunch of stuff and I got way too theological. So forget all that for today. What I want to share with you is that Jesus is I've said this before, Jesus is the final and fullest revelation of God, right? It says in the book of Hebrews that Jesus expresses the very character of God. So if you've ever asked, I wonder what God is like, well, all you have to do is look at Jesus and you know what God is like, because he is the one who expresses the very character of God. But when that happened, when the Messiah came and he came to reveal God, what terminology was applied to God and to the Messiah? What words do we call them? Father and Son, right? So when the best, fullest, and final revelation of God came into the world, Jesus, it was described in familial terms, right? Terms having to do with family. I think we should take note of that. That family is what God is all about, right? And what he did with Jesus is demonstrate what a true family relationship is supposed to be like. In fact, Jesus even said, no one truly knows the Father, meaning God, except the Son, meaning Jesus, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal God. Meaning, unless we go to Jesus and look at how he lived his life and how he interacted with God and how he interacted with others, we're never going to know what God is truly like. Because it is only Jesus who reveals God to us that allows us to see what God is like. And why do I even, in a sense, bring up God at this moment? Because, again, God is our Father, right? God is the foundation in our hearts that leads to how we act. That's what I've been talking about for several weeks now, actually, is that our relationship with God and how we interact with him and how we understand him will inform who we are and how we act, right? And so if we have a distorted or false image of God, a God who is angry, a God who is spiteful and full of vengeance and ready to strike us down or just wants to shame us because we've broken his commandments, if that's our picture of God, then that's how we're going to look at ourselves, and that's how we're going to treat people in our families, right? But if we start understanding, Paul, come on up, we're going to sing Good, Good Father. If we start understanding that God is a God of love, he is our loving Father, if you will, right? He loves us, and here's the thing. He knows we make mistakes, and he loves us anyway. And he wants us to come to him. When Timothy he's too young to say he makes mistakes, right? When he will make mistakes when he grows up, I'm not going to shame him. I'm not going to punish him. I'm going to say, well, that's no good. But we can learn from this, can't we? And I think that's, if I'm capable of that, then I think God's much more capable of being understanding and being loving towards us. That's the picture that I want us to have as we move forward as family relationships and just in our relationship with God. It's one of love and of understanding, kindness, compassion, and that, I think, will help us to grow and improve our families. So take a look at the back of your connection card. Go ahead and tear it out if you haven't already.